Mundo Gonzo começou sua jornada pelo mundo dos quadrinhos. Saímos aqui do Brasil, do Rio de Janeiro, e o nosso primeiro destino foi Londres para conversar com Peter Milligan.
It's an Epiphone.
Epiphone.
Yeah, so it's
Nice.
it's obviously owned by Gibson, and it's a copy of the original Gibson.
Saindo de Londres, a gente foi para Rosário, na Argentina, para ter um bate-papo descontraído com Eduardo Risso.
100 balas, sin lugar a dudas, fue el trabajo que más tiempo me consumió y fue el trabajo que más me ha brindado desde todo punto de vista. Así que le debo todo a 100 balas.
Da Argentina a gente voltou para a Europa, foi direto para a Itália para conversar com Laura Braga, artista da DC.
Sì, è vero, negli ultimi anni ci sono tanti italiani che stanno lavorando per i comics americani e io penso che sia una cosa bellissima.
Da Itália fomos para os Estados Unidos, onde encontramos Terry Moore e Axel Alonso.
This is from 2012.
Okay.
And this is crap. We don't
No!
So I think it's a good thing to see the Vault, TCO, Image, AWA all doing creator-owned books in their own way.
E é nos Estados Unidos que o Mundo Gonzo continua para falar com um escritor que já passou por Marvel, DC, além de escrever Star Wars, criou Green Jack, além de uma das fases mais memoráveis do grupo O Esquadrão Suicida. Senhoras e senhores, meninos e meninas, deem boas-vindas à lenda John Ostrander.
Hi, Mr. Sandler. Hello. Welcome to Mundo Gonzo.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor to meet you virtually. And starting now, I'd like to start with a question about the beginning of the Suicide Squad. Do you remember that the first version of Suicide Squad appeared in the late 50s? How did you come up with the idea of bringing them back to the comic book scene?
Well, I was just starting to work, or actually it was before I started working at DC. I was in contact with an editor there named Robert Greenberger, and we had met through conventions and had gotten very friendly. And then I was assigned to do Legends, at just plotting it. And Bob said, well, we'd like you to do a book, a regular book. And I told him I wanted to do Challengers of the Unknown, because that's one of the great titles in comics, Challengers of the Unknown.
Yeah.
So, and I told them, and they told me I couldn't have it. So then Bob said, but we have this old title from the 50s called Suicide Squad. You could do anything you want with that. And I said, Suicide Squad? What a stupid name. Who in their right mind would belong to something that calls itself a Suicide Squad? So then I went off and thought about it. And I said, well, people maybe who don't have a choice. Well, who doesn't have a choice? Prisoners. Who are prisoners in DC? Supervillains. Oh, okay. Now we're talking. And it fell into my head. I had recently seen a rerun of The Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
So the idea of combining The Dirty Dozen with supervillains and a touch of Mission Impossible, and boom, you have Suicide Squad.
Great.
Ok, translating now. O Levi Trindade perguntou como é que nasceu o Esquadrão Suicida nas mãos do John Ostrander, e ele falou que antes mesmo de começar a trabalhar com a DC, ele era muito amigo de um editor chamado Robert Greenberger, o Bob Greenberger, e eles sempre se encontravam nas convenções de quadrinhos. E o Greenberger queria que ele trabalhasse para DC, e o primeiro trabalho acabou sendo o Lendas, né, onde ele fez o plot, a trama. E quando foi perguntado qual gibi ele gostaria de traduzir, ele gostaria de traduzir os Challengers of the Unknown, os desafiadores do desconhecido, mas já estava com outra pessoa. Em troca, o editor Robert Greenberger ofereceu um título, na verdade, os personagens que apareceram na revista Brave and the Bold, nos anos 50, por um breve período, e ele poderia fazer qualquer coisa com o personagem, anything with the character. And then, ele achou o nome idiota, stupid name, e falou assim, mas quem que entraria num grupo chamado Esquadrão Suicida? Pessoas sem escolhas? Quem são as pessoas sem escolhas, geralmente? Prisioneiros, no universo da DC, seriam super vilões. O John tinha acabado de assistir Dirty Dozen, Os 12 Condenados, um filme com Lee Marvin, e ele se inspirou totalmente nesse filme para gerar missões impossíveis para os vilões da DC Comics.
Great. See, Mr. Ostrander, continuing Levi's question, something that always connected me to Suicide Squad was the uncertainties, right? They would go out on a mission, but not all of them would come back, right. From the mission. At that time, did you have to negotiate with DC who you could kill in the mission? How was it? You were, let's say, 100% with autonomous to do that. How was that negotiation to kill characters?
Well, I sold the series with the idea that some of them would die along the way. So I said, if you put them in my hands, they may not come out alive. So it was a given that, with a few exceptions, anybody who was in the squad might not survive any given issue. So they were pretty free with that from the start. It was part of the concept when I first sold it, was that people would die and we would keep on shaking up the roster.
Yeah, wow. Pessoal, translating now, ok? Eu perguntei para ele, continuando um pouco a pergunta do Levi, né, se ele tinha autonomia naquela época, na série do Esquadrão Suicida, para matar os personagens e como era a negociação com a DC para fazer isso. Então ele falou que, conceitualmente, isso já existia desde o início da série, né? Olha, vocês vão colocar os personagens na minha mão e eles podem morrer, né? Só existiam algumas exceções que ele não poderia matar, mas a grande maioria, né, e aí já conectando com o conceito da série, ele poderia sim matar. E eu acho que foi isso que, né, essa foi um dos elementos aí, esse foi um dos elementos que nos conectou bastante com a série naquela época, que era ainda, né, era difícil ter personagens que morriam, né, nas séries. So, Mario, what about you?
Okay, sir, just a little information. The first volume of Suicide Squad, compacting Secret Origins 14 and numbers 1 to 8, has just been released in Brazil yesterday. So this interview is not a coincidence, and we aimed to bring you together with the release. We are not receiving not a penny for that, but we love to have, you know, the journalistic hook to get in the news. So the book has just been released. It's pretty hot here in our newsstands and stores and online. So I think you would be happy to know about that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good timing because now is the movie out down there as well? The new movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes, it's very good timing to include the trade paperback along with the movie, and of course, being here.
Yes. So, eu vou traduzir depois, tá, pessoal, da pergunta. Straight to the question, one of the greatest sagas, DC sagas in my heart, close to Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's Legends. Mm-hmm. And it was your first work. So I would love to know.
At DC.
Yes, at DC. And, well, you were not a novice because you were already working for First Comics, but you were arriving at DC Comics. How was to work with big legends, Len Wein and John Byrne, in Legends, the saga? How was it for you? What was your contribution? Which idea came from whom, and things like that, please?
Well, the way it worked was my friend Mike Gold, who's responsible for getting me into comics, writing comics in the first place. He went from First Comics to being an editor at DC, and they handed him this project, which was the follow-up to Crisis, in a way. You know, Crisis was such a big success, they wanted another crossover, and and he wanted me because he knew me well, but I couldn't be the sole writer on it because I hadn't worked at DC before. So they said, "Well, John, you plot it, and then Len Wein will script it." And we found out that John Byrne, who had come from Marvel over to DC, this was going to be the book in which he drew some of the DC characters, I think like Wonder Woman, for the first time. So it became a book of firsts in many ways, people coming from somewhere else and coming into this.
Okay, so the plot was all yours then?
Basically, yes. I mean, I worked it out with Gold. He was a hands-on editor for that, but that's because it was very important to the company, and they all wanted to make sure that that I had the right feel for it. But I was a long-time reader of DC as well as Marvel, so it wasn't strange to me.
Okay, I'll translate now. Thank you for your answer, sir. Então, eu só comentei, antes da pergunta, eu comentei que não é coincidência que o Mundo Gonzo está trazendo o John Ostrander aqui um dia depois do encadernado saído da Panini, o volume 1 da série DC Vintage, né? Então foi bem planejado aí pelo senhor Cassiano. E então a pessoa pode ter um encadernado na mão, pode ver a entrevista ou ver a entrevista e etc. Né?
O encadernado está para venda aqui, tem um link aqui embaixo na descrição para quem quiser já garantir.
Perfeito. E eu perguntei, antes que nós mergulhássemos no Esquadrão Suicida, o primeiro trabalho dele foi em Lendas, e que eu considero, tá no meu coração, como uma das maiores sagas da DC Comics, né? Para mim, depois de Crise, Lendas é fantástica. E eu perguntei como é que foi trabalhar lá, e como é que foi trabalhar com outras duas lendas, porque o escritor, Len Wein, editor, estava lá, o John Byrne estava lá também. E aí ele falou que um amigo dele, editor, o convidou para fazer, que como ele tinha acabado de chegar, ele não poderia escrever sozinho. Mas ele falou, fica tranquilo, o plot é seu, a trama é sua, você dá a ideia, e escreve, e o Len Wein escreve com você, e vai ficar tudo bem. E quem tinha acabado de chegar na DC Comics nesse momento era o John Byrne, porque ele estava reformulando o Super-Homem nessa época. E o John Byrne ficou encarregado dos desenhos, mas como todos nós conhecemos, o John Byrne sempre dá seus pitacos nas tramas, né? Então a Lendas é filha de 3 pais. Mas basicamente é isso, a minha pergunta e a resposta.
Minha pergunta vai ser em português. Quem é que pode traduzir para ele? Marcelo?
Eu faço.
Beleza. Mr. Ostrander, my questions in Portuguese, Marcelo translated with you, ok? Perguntar para o senhor Ostrander sobre como ele começou a leitura de quadrinhos, já que ele basicamente cresceu numa época onde os quadrinhos viviam sob o regime do código de ética, né? Como é que foi conhecer os quadrinhos nessa época?
Cass is asking Mr. Ostrander, how did you get into comics as a reader, as a fan, right? Because you've grown up, when you were growing, right, as a kid, as a young adult, the US was using the Comics Code Authority, right, at that time, and the plots weren't so, let's say, mature, right? How was it? How we know that you started as an actor, right, in Chicago?
Yes.
And then how how was it transition to comics, to First Comics, right, which was the first publisher, it seems, that you, let's say, started working for. Tell us about it a little bit, please.
Okay, maybe this may be a two-part answer.
Okay.
And if you want, I can give a pause between the two parts.
Okay.
When I was young, I could read. My mother had read or heard of Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, which said superhero comics fostered homosexuality and juvenile delinquency. So I was told I was not permitted to read them. Being a young man or being a boy, of course, anything that is forbidden must be seen. So I would sneak out. I'd sneak the comics in. I would read them one way or the other. So I got my experience, all because it was a forbidden fruit to start with.
Ok, ele está falando, bom, ele vai responder em duas partes a pergunta que eu fiz, tá, pessoal? Então ele está falando que quando ele era mais novo, a mãe dele tinha o livro Sedução do Inocente, né, Seduction of the Innocent, do Frederick Wortham. E a gente teve aí já algumas discussões sobre essa obra, e a gente sabe que foi isso que baseou, né, depois o Comics Code Authority nos Estados Unidos, né. Então, para ele, quadrinhos, né, os comics, eram como se fosse um fruto proibido, né. Então, ele, desde aquela época, então, ele já tinha um interesse, por ser proibido, né, por ser jovem também ele tinha esse interesse pela mídia em si. E acho que agora ele... Mário, você pegou mais alguma coisa da resposta? Acho que foi isso, né? Tá bom. Please go ahead, Mr. Ostrander.
Okay. Then how did I wind up at First Comics, which was indeed my first publisher? Mike Gold, as I mentioned earlier, was a very good friend of mine, and we had known each other for years, and he knew of my love for comics and of my desire to write comics at that time. So when he started First Comics, he called me and said, would I like to try out for a backup into their first issue of their first comics, which was an adaptation of a stage play called Warp. I knew Warp backwards and forwards. I'd seen it so many times. And so, yes, I said I wanted to do it. And I picked a character. It was going to be 8 pages. Mike gave me instructions. I went off and I did the plot. And I came back. Mike gave me his notes, sent me away. I changed it with the notes and brought it back. And this went back and forth several times. And finally he calls me and says, well, congratulations, John. We're going to publish it. I said, that's great. Do I get paid for this? And he said, yes, you sap. And as a result, my story, Rough and Tumble with Sargon, Mistress of War, was in the back of the first issue of Warp. And then from there, it just went on and on. I was still in theater at the time, but this started to supplement my income and then eventually became my whole income.
Ok, thank you. E aí ele continuou a história, pessoal, falou que ele era amigo, ele conhecia o Mike Golden, né, que naquela época estava começando a trabalhar na First Comics. First Comics foi uma editora de décadas atrás que publicava, vocês vão lembrar aqui, os mais antigos, publicou títulos como Grimjack, John Sable e outros mais, né? Mas
Grendel também, não?
Grendel e outros mais. E aí o Mr. Ostrander falou que o Mike Golden sabia do amor dele por quadrinhos, né? E aí ofereceu, olha, eu tenho aqui um espaço para fazer uma história backup numa revista chamada Warp, era o número 1 dela, são 8 páginas, você quer tentar fazer? Ele falou, claro. E aí ele fez, né, mandou lá o roteiro, e aí teve muitas idas e vindas, né, desse trabalho, até, né, chegar ao final, e aí o Mike falou para ele, ó, você vai ser publicado. Aí ele falou, serei pago por isso? Aí o Mike Gold falou, sim, você vai ser pago por isso. Aí ele ficou maravilhado, né? Então, depois, nessa época ele ainda estava no teatro, né? Ele é originalmente um ator, ele estava fazendo teatro ainda, mas como a receita, né, o income dele, né, com quadrinhos, né, o que ele ganhava pelos quadrinhos começou a subir, começou a aumentar na vida dele, na carreira dele, ele foi largando o teatro aos poucos e se dedicando mais aos quadrinhos para nossa felicidade, né? Thank you very much, sir. So, Mário.
Único detalhe, então,
Levi, sorry, Levi.
antes do Levi perguntar, é porque tem um desenhista chamado Michael Golden e tem o editor, que é o Mike Gold. Mike Gold is the editor and Michael Golden is the penciler.
Sim, aí foi my bad, sim. Aí ainda bem que você corrigiu, Mário, porque eu falei Golden, né? Então é Mike Gold, Michael Golden. Different people.
Yes. Mike Gold is the crazy one that founded First Comics and then got away from First Comics and took everybody to DC. But anyway, Mr. Levi Trindade is going to ask you the next question, sir.
It's me again, sir. Returning to the squad, I have a curiosity. What was your favorite character on the team, and which were you more satisfied with creating a scene to eliminate him? After all, not everyone returned from missions, and were there any that you regretted having eliminated from the series?
Yeah, there would always have to be regrets. If it didn't bother me killing off a character, it wouldn't bother the reader. And so part of the rule was, part of me wants to keep the character because I can do more with them. I would invest more with them. As for my favorite, who's your favorite child? Because it's pretty much the same for me. These are
I don't have.
Yeah, although I will confess to 3 who were virtually safe from ever being killed off. I can say that now, but I didn't say that then. It was Captain Boomerang, Deadshot, and Amanda Waller. Those 3 were usually safe.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes totally sense. Thank you very much, sir. Translating now.
Mário?
Ok, translating now. O Levi perguntou qual era o personagem preferido do John Ostrander no Esquadrão Suicida, e ele comentou que ele estava... agora ele pode contar isso, porque ele não está escrevendo o gibi, mas que 3 personagens sempre estiveram a salvo de morrer. Capitão Boomerang, o Pistoleiro e a criação dele, Amanda Waller. Né? O John Ostrander criou a Amanda Waller, ela existe até hoje, né? É um personagem muito importante, muito marcante no universo DC.
Dos mais.
Great. So, you've written so many things, right, so far. Is there a difference between writing more obscure characters like Martian Manhunter, Firestorm, or, I don't know, others, then let's say Batman, Star Wars, and so on? Is the editorial tightness higher with more, let's say, known characters?
It would be, say, with Batman, Superman. There's a point when I was also doing some work for Marvel. I was working on the book X-Man, and I would run into trouble because I'd submit a plot and it would have to be approved by the main X-Men office, the editor in charge there. And I would get a rejection, and they would say, well, you can't do that because it's too close to what we're planning to do in the big book. And I said, well, okay, tell you what, why don't you just tell me what you're planning to do so I don't run into this again? And they told me that I didn't have high enough clearance for it. So eventually I left X-Men because it was too hard to do. I kept away from the major characters because I like playing and having control on some of the more obscure characters, and I could invent them more. I could invent things to their background. Deadshot was nothing but a little half page in Who's Who, giving some basic details, and I was able to take that and just weave this whole complete character on him. Yeah, Deadshot. And he became one of my favorite characters. Now, over at Star Wars, yeah, everything that we did there not only had to go through the editor, but also through the Star Wars licensing people who could also pick problems with it. But Jan and I knew Star Wars so well that it got to the point to where they would say, well, we don't think the characters would do this or that or the other thing. We'd like you to make a change. And Jan and I would go, okay, of course, we'll make the changes if you want. But we remember something like this in this movie or in this book or in that other comic. And so we thought this was a fair continuance of that. And they would think about it and they go, okay, you're right. And after a while, they just sort of let us go ahead with it, with what we were doing, because they knew that we knew Star Wars and we loved and respected Star Wars. So it depends upon the editor. Some editors will be more hands-on, some less. Bob Greenberger had some very definite ideas to contribute at the start of Suicide Squad. Captain Boomerang was in there because Bob said, well, let's put him in there. The Flash isn't using him. And I went, no, Captain Boomerang, he's a silly character. Look at that costume. But I got him, and I was able to do whatever I wanted with him. And he became our chief rogue. And I just loved him because no matter how low he sank, he could always find another level to sink to. So he knew what he was, and he enjoyed it. And if anybody else had a problem with it, that's their problem.
Amazing. That's amazing. Eu perguntei, pessoal, qual era a diferença? Qual é a diferença entre escrever personagens mais obscuros, Ajax, né, o Caçador de Marte, Nuclear, etc., e personagens, vamos dizer, mais conhecidos, né, os big shots da editora, Marvel, Batman, Star Wars, etc. Né? E ele falou que, bom, em resumo, depende do editor. Né? Ele deu alguns exemplos aqui, né? Deu o exemplo de X-Men, que ele tinha que aprovar o que ele queria fazer com o diretor do núcleo dos mutantes, né? E aí era uma coisa um pouco mais controlada, e aí quando ele perguntava, mas o que vocês querem fazer com os personagens? Ah, você não tem autorização para saber. Então, isso era um exemplo ruim, né? Esse é um que ele deu. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, ele deu um exemplo bom, né? Do próprio Esquadrão Suicida, do Robert Greenberger, que dava mais autonomia para ele, né? Que confiava mais nele. Star Wars foi um outro exemplo, que você tinha que pedir autorização do licenciante, né, para fazer as histórias. Mas, assim, resumindo, depende mais do editor, que está no título no momento, do que necessariamente do personagem, né, que ele está escrevendo. Em resumo, seria isso. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I think it's me again. Sir, I have noticed that you have a great memory, or you research a lot, or both. Reading Secret Oranges 14, you recapped a lot of the DC history from the back ages, from the 40s and the 50s and so on. So, what can you tell me specifically about that issue, Secret Oranges 14, the very first issue dedicated to the Suicide Squad? How much did you research? How much was memory? And how do you work? Please.
Well, first of all, I was and am a fan of continuity. I don't believe in a slavish obedience to continuity. I feel free to change things if it'll make a better story, but I always try to respect that continuity. And with that story in particular, I had read some of the back issues of that just to get a feel for it. But yeah, I'd have DC had a library of back issues and stuff, so I was close enough to the main office at that time that I could go in and lose myself in the library for a while. So some of it was memory, some of it was, but a lot of it, I tend to do a fair amount of research on my books when it's something that I don't know. When I did my Western The Kents, I did a ton of research. So I kind of enjoy research. The danger is I can get lost in it. I can start, there was a Suicide Squad storyline where they go to Russia, and in order to free this dissident who it turns out doesn't really want to go. So as part of the thing, they were taking a train back through and back out. I actually got a hold of Russian train schedules to see if it was feasible that they could in fact do that. You don't have to do that. You really don't, but just to make it more authentic, I tracked an actual train route you could have taken.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I have just translated the story in just another day, you know. It's beautiful. O Márcio fez a gentileza de mostrar, né, o volume ali do Esquadrão Suicida. Marcelo, perdão. E a primeiríssima história, depois que o Esquadrão Suicida sai de lendas, ela foi publicada numa revista chamada Origens Secretas 14, Secret Oranges 14. E foi ali que ele fez toda a origem do Esquadrão Suicida. E eu perguntei, mas eu notei que ele tinha pesquisado muito, ou a memória dele era muito grande. E eu perguntei qual dos dois, ou se os dois, e ele falou assim, olha, eu sou fã há muito tempo, eu adoro a continuidade, eu respeito a continuidade, mas eu não me torno um escravo da continuidade. Eu tento mudar, desde que tenha uma certa lógica. Ele morava perto da DC Comics, e o escritório central da DC Comics, então, em Nova York, tinha uma biblioteca bem grande, com edições bem antigas, e ele se deslocava para lá e leu pilhas e pilhas de gibis envolvendo os diversos esquadrões suicidas que existiram antes, com esse nome, inclusive Força Tarefa X, etc. E o único risco que ele se perdeu, ele se divertiu muito pesquisando, mas ele correu o risco de ficar perdido, porque era um festival de informações. Mas aí ele falou assim, ó, se você quer saber o nível de pesquisa que eu gosto de fazer é o seguinte, nesse primeiro encadernado, que acabou de sair, o Esquadrão Suicida vai para a extinta União Soviética, e tem uma trama que eles têm que se deslocar dentro da União Soviética, e ele precisava que o esquadrão pegasse uma linha de trem. E o nível de pesquisa dele foi dele pegar todos os cronogramas e mapas de linhas de trem da União Soviética naquela época. E apesar de ouvir o editor dele falar assim, você não precisa fazer isso, John. Sim, eu não preciso, mas eu gosto de ser autêntico. Authentic. Então é esse o nível de pesquisa, né? Ele tem boa memória porque ele é fã, ele respeita a continuidade, mas não é escravo dela, e ele pesquisa até dar o gostinho de realismo dentro das obras dele.
Nice. Ok, vou abrir para o chat aqui.
Uhum.
Começar com o Von Deus, né? Von Deus aqui, mandando perguntinha. Ele tem uma série de trabalhos com o Tom Mandrake, ou Mandrake, né? Não sei como é a pronúncia em inglês. Foi uma parceria que deu certo. Como era trabalhar junto em projetos diferentes com o mesmo artista?
Tá. Mr. Ostrander, we have a question from the audience here, right? Sure. Von Deus is asking you have lots of works with Tom Mandrake, right? It's like a partnership that, let's say, worked out a lot, right? How was it to work with him in many different projects with the same artist, let's say?
Well, I love working with Tom. I can just, as with artists who I know well, like Jan Dersema, who is Tom's wife as well, we can sometimes work in a shorthand. I can sort of suggest something and Tom will take it and do something much more with it. We started working together on Grimjack when he came in to take over some issues. And then he was working at DC and I wanted to work with him some more. So I believe the next work we did together was on Firestorm. And then from there to Spectre and Martian Manhunter. So I just love working with Tom. It's easy, you know, not to get weird on it, but it is sort of like a marriage in which if you know each other very well, you can finish each other's sentences. Tom can take Tom will sometimes take what I plotted and draw what he thinks I meant to plot. And he's usually correct.
Uau. Traduzindo aqui, pessoal, a pergunta do Von Deus, né? Ele respondeu o seguinte, ele gosta muito de trabalhar com o Tom Mandrake, é como se fosse um casamento, e aí ele, né, mencionou alguns trabalhos que eles fizeram, começaram lá atrás com o Grimjack, The First Comics, o Tom Mandrake fez alguns números lá, depois, né, como ele trabalhava na DC, o Tom Mandrake, ele mencionou os trabalhos, né, do Nuclear, do Ajax, o Caçador de Marte, do Espectro, né? São runs, né? São fases que não necessariamente saíram no Brasil completas, tá? É bom mencionar isso aqui. Mas ele falou uma coisa interessante no final, que é como se o Tom, ele já soubesse o que o John Ostrander gostaria de fazer, né? Gostaria de escrever mesmo antes, né? Ou mesmo sem ele escrever. Então é como se eles tivessem essa conexão, vamos dizer, simbiótica nesses trabalhos, né? Thank you, sir.
Levi?
It's me again, sir. Now, a question about another character. How was the decision to bring Barbara Gordon back into the spotlight, but now renewed as Oracle? Was it something that required a lot of negotiation with the editors of Batman titles?
Okay, is the translation done? Should I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I was writing Suicide Squad with my wife, the late Kim Yale, at the time, and this is when Killing Joke came out, and Barbara Gordon was at one point shot by the Joker, and they were intending for her to be crippled. They didn't want to work with Batgirl anymore. They didn't want to work with Barbara Gordon anymore. They felt that she was a silly character. Kim and I both disagreed. We felt that as much as I loved the people who were involved in the book, we felt that was gratuitous and disrespectful to the character. So we asked for her, and they weren't going to do anything further with her. They were going to let her drift into oblivion. And we said, give her to us. And from that, we decided that, first of all, that shot, if it didn't kill her, would have crippled her for life. And we weren't going to cure her. We wanted that to be a real consequence of that action. So we were going to have her in a wheelchair. And so from that, she becomes, again, we borrow from continuity. It was established that she was a whiz with computers. So we decided to make her the information broker for the DC universe. We felt that if we did this right, a lot of writers would want to use Oracle, because if in their plot, their character had to find out something, well, now they don't have to spend a lot of time having the character look around. How do they learn this? Instead, they just put in a call to Oracle. she digs it up, gives it to them, and they go on with the plot. And it was true. She became a very popular character with a lot of the writers and with a lot of people in a lot of the fans, especially the ones who themselves have suffered. The word disability is not favored, but challenged, shall we say, physically challenged. And particularly when we did the her year one story, Kim at the time, and Kim, by the way, was very sick at the time. This would be her last story, but she insisted that we spend a page showing Barbara going home from the hospital, and spend a whole page showing how you transfer from a wheelchair into a car, because something that is simple for us, for the able-bodied, would not be simple for her. And so we wanted to show that. And we got lots of letters back from the challenged community who were very appreciative. And Barbara was a big hero for them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ostrander.
Okay, now I will translate. Então, o Levi perguntou como é que foi a experiência de trazer a Bárbara Gordon de volta para o universo DC, sendo que ela seria encostada, e o John Ostrander e a esposa dele renovaram, repaginaram e deram um novo brilho para a personagem. O fato é que quando o John chegou lá, a DC tinha praticamente acabado de lançar, estava para lançar ali a Piada Mortal, Killing Joke, e a intenção original era matar a personagem ou deixar num coma vegetativo. E ele falou que ele adora os autores da Piada Mortal, né? O Alan Moore, o Brian Boland, e ele achou que seria um desrespeito com o personagem matá-lo. E ele pediu para, se possível, deixá-la aleijada como consequência real daquela ação. Ele trouxe a personagem de volta como na cadeira de rodas. A Bárbara sempre foi inteligente, não teria nenhum problema dela ser um especialista em computador, um gênio da computação. E ele a reapresentou como uma central de informações do universo DC. E ele entende que isso foi tão bem feito por ele e pela finada esposa dele, a Kim Yale, que nós perdemos no ano de 1996, que outros roteiristas gostaram. Né? Ele falou assim, nossa, a gente fez alguma coisa certa, porque os outros roteiristas gostaram, porque resolvia inclusive um problema de trama, porque acelerava a trama. Em vez do personagem ficar investigando, porque nem todo mundo é o Batman, bastava ligar para o Oráculo e a trama já se acelerava e partia para os finalmente. E a personagem foi se tornando cada vez mais popular. Na época, a Kimberly Yale, a esposa dele, ela estava doente já, e ela fazia frequentes visitas ao hospital, e ela insistiu para mostrar uma cena, uma página inteira da dificuldade da Bárbara Gordon de se transferir da cadeira de rodas para o carro, algo que qualquer um de nós poderia, teoricamente, fazer com alguma tranquilidade. Ela insistiu, a quem bateu o pé, foi publicado assim, e a DC Comics, naquela época sem internet, recebeu toneladas de cartas da comunidade, das pessoas que têm alguma questão física, né, alguma limitação física. Então é um sucesso, e essas cartas sim foram o prêmio dele, né, esse retorno com a quantidade de cartas elogiando e agradecendo pela atitude dele e da Kim Yale.
Estava tentando achar aqui essa passagem que ele falou nos paperbacks. Eu vou achar.
Me fala qual paperback que eu tento procurar aqui a página.
Deve estar no 8º, Cass, tá? Deve estar no 8º, pelo que eu vi aqui, mas vamos ver.
Fazendo sua pergunta enquanto procuro.
Okay, we were trying to find in the paperbacks, this, let's say, page with the wheelchair, Barbara Gordon trying to enter in the car. We will try and show still in this live, okay? So
yeah, I think there's a version of it if you got one about Batgirl's best stories, that was also included in that one at the time.
Okay. Cass, nas melhores histórias da Batgirl, talvez tenha. Eu não tenho ele aqui, tá? Então se alguém tiver, quiser mostrar. Ok. See, I will make a parenthesis now, okay, and ask you something about a very interesting work that you did in the middle of your career, which is called Wasteland, right? It's a title that you had with Del Close, right? The comedian.
Yes.
And it lasted for 18 issues, 18, right? 1-8. It was from DC, and important to say, it was before Vertigo, right? Imprint, right? But it was a very mature title, right? Mixing something like Tales from the Crypt, The Twilight Zone, and so on.
Yeah.
And how was it? How was to, let's say, switch from the mainstream, let's say that, right, to more, let's say, mature book, where, let's say, in theory, you had more, let's say, freedom to create and publish?
Well, the book was actually the idea of Mike Gold, and who was going to be the editor of it as well. And he talked me into it. Mike can talk me into almost anything.
Yeah.
And Del Close and I had been working together on the Munden Spars stories that were in the back of Grimjack. Now, just a word about Del. Del was not only a comedian, but he was also a teacher. He was a director. He was teacher and director at Second City in Chicago, and after that, what's now known as I.O. And the list of people who he trained and influenced is truly incredible. He's one of the great influences on American comedy towards the end of last century. He was also a big fan of comic books and of science fiction and of horror, so I thought he would be a good person. Oh, Mike also thought that he would be a good person to join me. So Dill and I actually, if you want to know what our working style was like, there's actually a story in Wasteland of Del and I trying to write a Wasteland story, and it's not far off from the truth. We even used, we got photo references from my office where we were working at the time, and in that story they have my actual office. So the whole idea on Wasteland was we didn't want to do the typical comic book horror stories, some of which are great. You know, when you go to Creepy Eerie, all the great stories from Warren and back, there's classic stuff there, but we didn't want to do that. Horror, usually they take you into a situation and scare you and then bring you out again on the other side. What we wanted to do, and often did, was we wanted to take you into the middle of the horror, so to speak, and leave you there. Find your own way out. Make up your own ending on it. It was also a very, very funny book in places, but a very macabre sense of humor. Mike once described it as the black hole of humor. It's humor so black, no laughter can get out of it. So, and we only went 18. Mike likes to say that we figured if we were doing our job right, we would get canceled in 12 issues. I guess we didn't do our job right because we lasted at 18. And eventually at that point, we had to stop because Del had sort of dropped out and I was writing the entire thing. It was more difficult to write. Writing a single story in Wasteland could take me as long as to write a full issue of anything else. So it became very difficult for me to do that and keep my schedule up.
Okay, I will try. I took some notes here, trying to, let's say, keep everything, but Mario, se eu esquecer de alguma coisa.
Sure,
translating now. Eu perguntei para ele sobre um título chamado Wasteland. que é um título inédito no Brasil e que saiu pela DC lá nos Estados Unidos anos antes do selo Vértigo começar, né? E aí era um selo adulto, era um título, né, adulto, durou 18 edições, e o mesmo Mike Gold, que a gente falou umas perguntas atrás, foi quem teve a ideia, e os responsáveis pelos roteiros desse título, né, esse título tinha várias histórias curtas, era o John Ostrander e o Del Close, que é um comediante, tem vários trabalhos, influenciou um monte de gente, tem muita coisa sobre a história dele, depois vocês pesquisem aí na web, mas basicamente eram histórias, era um terror diferente, né? E ele deu uma definição aqui que não era uma coisa típica, né? Era uma mistura de sci-fi com terror, e ele chamou aqui de buraco negro do humor. Então, vou te jogar num buraco negro, leitor, e você acha seu jeito de sair dele, porque nosso título aqui, nossas histórias, não são usuais. Então, você se vira. Então, realmente eram histórias bem originais naquela época, né? Depois a gente pega aqui o ano certinho, mas era final dos anos 80, início dos 90, não lembro. Quem quiser dar uma pesquisada aí. E o título iria durar de 12 edições, mas estava indo bem, né? E acabou durando 18. E acabou
de 87 e 89, completando.
Boa, obrigado, Levi. Então foi no finalzinho dos anos 80 mesmo. O Del Close ia ter que se retirar do título e o John Ostrander não ia conseguir tocar sozinho, porque uma história curta desse título, Wasteland, ele demorava o mesmo tempo para fazer do que uma edição completa de um outro título, né, que ele fazia para DC, por exemplo. Então, ele não ia conseguir fazer, né, o título sozinho, por isso que acabou com 18 edições. Mas é inédito no Brasil. Eu não sei se existe ainda esse material para ser licenciado, né? Não sei se pela DC ou pelos próprios autores, mas pesquisem. São histórias bem interessantes. Thank you, sir.
E eu achei a página. Batman Chronicle number 5.
Yeah.
Você consegue jogar, Cass, depois aí?
Vou colocar agora.
Cass he's putting the page that you mentioned about Barbara Gordon, for the audience to check now, and I guess it will, let's say,
yes.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
That's a very strong page. Very strong page.
Yeah. Light on the scripting, but it was meant for the visuals to carry so much of it.
Essa história foi indicada ao WISE, né? Inclusive.
Interessante, pessoal. O Cassiano foi buscar, né, essa página que ele tinha mencionado na outra resposta sobre a Batgirl Barbara Gordon, e essa página mostra, né, o que o Mário estava falando aí da dificuldade da pessoa que é cadeirante, né, entrar e sair de um carro, e é uma página bem forte, né, bem representativa.
Mário?
Bom, Mário?
Okay. Sir, before going into comics, you were in a seminary, I don't remember if Catholic or Episcopal, and you also were an actor. How much of your seminary experience and acting experience got into your way of writing, and can relate certain things from your seminary days to the Spectre?
Actually, people make a bigger thing of that than it was. I spent 1 year, the freshman year in high school, in a Roman Catholic seminary because I had had a overdose of watching Going My Way and got influenced by that and decided I wanted to be a priest. That ended a year later when I more or less discovered girls. Dating was not encouraged at the seminary. So I left there and went on. And then got involved in theater about my sophomore year in high school when I moved to another school. And the theater has a tremendous influence. Now, the seminary, my interest in the seminary does show an interest I have in those sort of questions, which might show up in the Spectre, but there's very little direct influence of the seminary on the Spectre itself. Let's see. As for, well, Terry, why don't you answer that, and then I'll talk more about the theater.
Ok. Ele tá falando, ele dividiu em duas partes de novo a resposta. Ele falou que ele frequentou uma escola católica, pelo menos o primeiro ano do segundo grau.
Ele fez seminário. Ele fez seminário.
Fez seminário.
Por um
Mário,
ano.
Desculpa
Fala,
interromper.
Marcelo.
Fala sua pergunta para o público primeiro.
Sim. Obrigado. Perdão, pessoal. Empolgado aqui com o John. Obrigado, viu, Marcelo? Obrigado mesmo. Eu perguntei para ele o quanto que a experiência dele no seminário e no teatro influenciou ele como influenciou como roteirista, e se existe uma relação direta do tempo de seminário e o que ele escreveu no Espectro. E aí ele falou que ele frequentou uma escola católica, foi ao seminário, né, passou um ano no seminário, ele queria muito ser padre, mas eis que ele descobriu as garotas. E aí ele mudou de escola.
Aconteceu mesmo comigo.
E ele fala que não existe necessariamente uma relação tão direta com o espectro, porém, as perguntas que ele coloca na boca dos personagens da revista do Espectro são as mesmas que ele queria responder na época dele de seminário. Sir, the first part is already in Portuguese.
Okay, now we'll talk about the influence theater has had, and that is far, far greater. I never took an actual writing class. Much of what I learned about writing came from my time in the theater, often as an actor, but also as a playwright, as a director. I produced very badly. I'm not very good at that. I built sets. I cleaned the bathrooms. I've done just about everything in theater that you can think of. And what it taught me, first of all, is it's not one person. Even if you're the actor on stage, you still depend upon so many people, your fellow actors, the directors, the playwright, the stagehands, the set, the scenery, the costumes. All of it needs to be working together. And so it taught me how to collaborate. Then also what I know about writing, I learned more or less from play structure, from having been in plays, from having written plays. So, and there's just so many other, one of the best teachers I had ever was in college and just happened to be in theater. And the man's name was Harold Lang. He was a British actor and teacher. He was there for one semester. 1 year. And among the great things they taught me, but he taught us that you have a right to fail. You have a right to try something and have it not work, so long as it's an honest attempt and you go with it. Don't be afraid of failing. And that taught me to take chances. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So what? But at least you learn what doesn't work. And sometimes you have to learn by failing. So theater taught me dialogue, how to express character through dialogue, how to express action through dialogue, how to meld theme into the story. So much of what I know about writing comes from theater.
Great. I will translate now. Marcelo, eu vou precisar da sua ajuda porque deu uma pipocada no meu áudio, então fica muito à vontade para completar o que ficar para trás, tá bom?
Tá bom.
Então agora ele falou da experiência dele no teatro, que não foi pequena. Ele foi ator, ele foi dramaturgo, né, o roteirista do teatro, ele foi diretor, apesar dele se chicotear bastante nas costas quanto a dirigir, ele fala que é um péssimo diretor, ele chegou a limpar banheiros, ele fez de tudo. Se tem uma coisa que ele aprendeu, foi o espírito de equipe, que não se trata de apenas uma pessoa construindo algo, são várias pessoas trabalhando juntas, e o teatro o ensinou a colaborar, cooperar, trabalhar em equipe. Aí vem a parte do áudio picotado, que ele mencionou que ele aprendeu toda uma estrutura de como se deve colocar os personagens no local certo para desenvolver a ação certa. E aqui que antes de continuar, eu pergunto para o Marcelo o que eu perdi no caminho.
Não, eu acho que é isso aí. Um elemento que ele trouxe também, que eu achei interessante, é que o teatro o ensinou a conectar a parte dramática com a parte de ação, né? Então ele conseguiu encaixar essas coisas, que são coisas que a gente vê nas histórias dele, até do Esquadrão Suicida, né? Tem aquela carga de ação grande, mas você tem a carga também dramática dos diálogos, né, da interação dos personagens, das tramas, né, paralelas. Então, ficou muito claro, né, como o teatro o credenciou, né, para fazer tudo de bom que ele faz nos quadrinhos também.
Aí, muito obrigado. Aí entra na parte do ator, né, que um ator britânico que deu aula para ele 1 ano. Né? E aí ele falou que ele aprendeu que ele tem o direito de tentar, ele tem o direito de errar, assim, ele tem o direito de tentar, porque tem gente que nem tenta, né? Aí tem o direito de errar, que se ele errar, se for uma tentativa honesta, ele não precisa ter medo. E aí ele aprendeu a se arriscar, porque ele aprendeu com esse ator britânico que, pelo menos, quando você falha, você aprende alguma coisa quando você falha. E aí, costurando junto com o que o Marcelo colocou muito bem, que o teatro ensinou o diálogo para ele, não só em termos de diálogo entre duas pessoas, mas construir ações dentro do diálogo. Né? A ação ela fica melhor explicada com o apoio do diálogo. E aí eu não sei realmente se o Marcelo captou algo mais que ele considera importante.
Não, acho que a ideia é essa mesmo. É isso mesmo. Perfeito.
Thank you, sir.
Mais uma pergunta do chat. Pedro Bolsa. Quer fazer direto, Marcelo?
Faço. Sir, one more question from the audience here, okay? Our friend Pedro Bolsa is asking about Legends, the saga, right? Well, this can be polemic here, but who has created the sunspot sequence? He wants to know if it was you or John Byrne, because we know that John Byrne, he always, let's say, tries to, let's say, even if he's only, let's say, the artist, he always, let's say, try to get into the script and give ideas and so on. So I don't remember the sequence myself, but it's a sunspot sequence, right? Não sei se alguém lembra aqui, pessoal. But...
ele dando um tiro no próprio pé com o poder dele para se livrar.
It's a shot in his own foot, right? To release himself from, I don't know, from something. Do you remember this sequence, sir?
No,
Legends.
I'm afraid I don't.
Yeah,
it's not ringing bells.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem. But I mean, maybe the essence of the question is, I don't know, was John Byrne annoying during the Legends saga, the storyline with you and Landwine?
No, basically, because this was his first work for DC as well. Sometimes, I mean, he wouldn't necessarily follow the plot exactly. There was one thing where he was doing one story up on top and then the Suicide Squad story in the final panel going across at the bottom. I'm not quite sure why he chose to do it that way, but he did. But we made it work anyway. It certainly contributed to the immense continuing popularity of Legends. Legends keeps on being basically republished all the time. So it was a very popular book, and John certainly had a large hand in that.
Yeah, for sure. Pessoal, então vocês viram a pergunta do Pedro aqui, e a sequência exata que o Pedro colocou, ele não se lembra, mas aí eu tentei transformar um pouco a pergunta, né? Que não deixa de ser polêmica. E aí eu coloquei para ele, não, na verdade, talvez a essência seja, a gente sabe que vocês estão me ouvindo ainda?
Sim, sim.
Okay. A gente sabe que o John Byrne, muitas vezes, mesmo sendo só o artista, ele gosta de se meter na história, no roteiro, etc. E aí eu perguntei, né, se ele foi irritante ou muito entrão né, na contribuição com ele com o Len Wein. E ele falou que não, teve sim algumas sequências aqui e ali que o John Byrne quis fazer do jeito dele, mas que no final o trabalho do John Byrne contribuiu, né, para a saga Lendas ser o que foi, né, bem importante para o universo DC, e também projetar o próprio John Byrne, né, que foi o primeiro trabalho dele, parece, na DC, ou um dos primeiros, projetar ele, porque depois disso ele saiu fazendo, vocês sabem, né, o Superman e por aí vai. Então a saga em si contribuiu muito para a carreira do John Byrne também. Então, resumindo, é isso. Thank you very much, sir.
Levi.
Ô, Cass, só um minutinho, Levi.
Ok.
Eu não sei, já que passou aqui de uma hora, não sei se você já quer dar alguma ideia aqui para o Mr. Ostrander sobre tempo.
Não,
etc.
a gente tem mais já meia horinha, ele deu 1h30
Okay.
pra gente.
Demora, tem 20 minutos, né?
20 minutinhos.
Okay, so sir, 20 minutes to go, okay? Just to give some more questions. Levi, please.
Mr. Ostrander, I'd like to talk now about the absurd amount of pages you produced in the late 80s and early 90s. While working incessantly on several titles at DC Comics, how was it for you to create the stories for Green Jack at the same time? I ask this because your workload at the time was very high.
Yeah, I would do about 4 books. In some months, I did 6.
Wow.
That's a little bit more than even at that time I should have been doing. 3 to 4 is generally my most comfortable load. They were different, certainly, entities because I had ownership on Grimjack. I had real control on Grimjack. I was the writer. I was the creator. They didn't mess with me. If I said no, then it was no. At DC and Marvel, I've long accustomed myself to the fact that I don't own these characters. Anything that happens with them after they leave my hands there's nothing I can do about that. And I accept that. You know, they're not I don't own them. Grimjack, I do. Grimjack, I have ownership rights to. So that's a large measure of the difference between the two.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Ok, translating. O Levi mencionou a quantidade absurda de páginas que o John Ostrander escrevia naquela época, e o John comentou que ele chegou a escrever até mesmo 6 edições por mês. Galera, isso aí é criar 132 páginas para mais do zero. Né? Só para vocês terem uma noção do que se trata. E o Levi perguntou como é que fazia isso, como é que era com o Green Jack, e a resposta é assim: olha, quando eu estou trabalhando com a Marvel e com a DC, eu tenho uma série de limitações. São são tipos de criaturas diferentes. O da Marvel e da DC, que é um tipo de criatura, e o Green Jack. O Green Jack é dele, ele não precisa perguntar nada para ninguém, ele faz o que quiser com o Green Jack, né? Ele está em casa. Marcelo. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Sir, I will make you a broader question, okay? How do you foresee comic book industry from now on? Does it need the cross media to survive? Because we see, right, many comics being transformed into movies and other things, series and so on. Does it need this cross media to survive, or I don't know, do you foresee a future for comics by itself?
I can't honestly say that I know for sure. I think that it's also up in the air. I'm not even sure if movies will continue to be in theaters. They've started this thing now of streaming subscription services where, my concern is that the movies will start being made for small screens rather than the big screen. As for comics, will the big companies continue to invest the money into making them? On the other hand, there are always those who want to do comics, who want to create comics, who want to write and draw and all the rest. And I think they will find a way to get their comics out there. It may be that we won't see them as much in physical form. They may be, it may come to where they'll all be in digital. I have done 2, as they call Kickstarters, which are privately funded books, Cross Hollow Ground with Tom Mandrake and Hexer Dusk with Jan Darsama. And that may be the sort of direction. A lot of people are doing Kickstarters these days. This way they can own the characters. Because that's another question that has been rising, especially lately, about the big companies take the stories that were created for the comics and they make billions off of them in terms of movies and games and TV shows. And the original creators often see nothing or a pittance compared to the amount of money that is being made by the studios. And the studios are not necessarily inclined to share. So it would be nice if they were, but it's a very big question as to where comics in general will lead. I think there will be comics in some form, but what that form will be, I have no idea.
Ok, thank you. Eu perguntei para ele, pessoal, e é uma pergunta muito ampla, e a resposta não é fácil, tá? Como é que ele vê daqui para frente o futuro da indústria de quadrinhos, né? A gente vê muita coisa saindo dos quadrinhos e sendo transformado em série, em filmes, né? E eu perguntei se esse cross-mídia, né, essa interação de uma mídia para outra, esse cruzamento, se ele é realmente necessário para que os quadrinhos sobrevivam daqui para frente. Bom, a resposta dele foi na linha de que ele não consegue prever, né? A gente vê hoje também muita coisa sendo mudando, né? Muita coisa que seria, vamos dizer, que sairia na tela grande no cinema, mudando um pouco a estratégia, saindo na tela pequena, né? No streaming, né? No streaming caseiro. Então ele não tem muito como prever. Ele vê o digital como um dos caminhos, né, para ajudar os quadrinhos a sobreviverem, mas também ele menciona que sempre vai ter gente querendo fazer quadrinhos, tá? E deu exemplos próprios. Ele fez recentemente 2 projetos no Kickstarter, que é como se fosse um catarse lá dos Estados Unidos, né? Um com o Tom Mandrake, que a gente falou aqui já hoje, né, esse artista, e outro com a Jan Darsama, né? Projetos que eles, né, ele e os artistas são donos, né, do conteúdo, ou seja, eles não precisaram de grandes estúdios, grandes editores para fazerem esses quadrinhos, e foi um crowdfunding, né, um financiamento público. Então, assim, ele vê editoras ou até estúdios ganhando bilhões, né, com ideias que surgiram nos quadrinhos, e nem sempre esse tipo de empresa gosta de dividir essa receita, esse lucro. Mas ele vê, sim, então, uma sobrevivência para a mídia de quadrinhos, ele só não sabe como vai ser isso, tá? Então, em resumo, seria isso.
Mário?
Okay, sir, or should I say Dr. Fitzgibbons? Oh, sir, so I am very curious to know, how was it going back to acting? How was playing Dr. Fitzgibbons in the latest Suicide Squad movie? And how was working with Mr. Peter Gunn?
Well, first of all, let's start off by saying James Gunn is just a genius, and he's a terrifically nice guy. And I'm so honored that they asked me to come down and do the cameo of Dr. Fitzgibbons. And he even tossed me some lines, one of which actually made it into the movie. Coming back to acting was actually very interesting, because I simply applied. I created sort of a character from what little I was given, and said, okay, he's probably this, he's probably that, he's probably the other thing. and that all played into just a little bit that I was doing. So it was still there. I could do it. If anything, it was a little bit easier because I didn't have all the baggage that I had back when I was actually trying to be a professional actor. All the emotional baggage. So I wasn't thinking of my career. I was just like, I'm having fun. And they treated me wonderfully. I had my own trailer down there. They fed me wonderfully. They put me up at a nice hotel. Everyone was really, really nice to me. I met the guy playing Polka Dot Man. I shared my scene with Michael Rooker. It was all just, it was just such a good time.
Well, sir, nothing less than you deserve, right?
Yeah. I'll agree.
Yes.
Pessoal, eu fiz uma brincadeirinha com ele. Eu falei, senhor Ostrander, ou melhor, Dr. Fitzgibbons, que é o papel dele no filme do Esquadrão Suicida, que está estourando aí. E eu perguntei, afinal de contas, como é que foi voltar a atuar, já que você era um ator de teatro, e como foi trabalhar com o Peter Gunn?
James Gunn.
James Gunn, perdão. Obrigado pela correção, pessoal. O James Gunn é o que ele falou, terrific nice guy, um cara muito legal, né? E ele foi excelentemente bem tratado. Ele foi convidado para fazer o Dr. Fitzgibbons. E ele falou que foi muito interessante.
Tem a foto aí na tela dele, né? Essa é a foto na tela no set.
Isso. E ele falou que foi interessante. Foi interessante voltar a atuar. Ele recebeu o papel dele e pensou, bom, provavelmente então esse personagem é mais ou menos desse jeito, mais ou menos daquele e tal, e já imaginou qual seria o background, né, o currículo desse personagem. Ele falou que foi incrivelmente mais fácil atuar dessa vez do que na época do teatro. Porque não tinha a carga emocional daquela época, porque naquela época ele estava tentando ser um ator e a vida dele poderia depender do salário de ator, do cachê de ator. Dessa vez não. Ele foi totalmente leve, ele se divertiu bastante, ele foi maravilhosamente bem tratado pela equipe de filmagem, ele ficou num hotel muito bom, e todo mundo o tratou muito bem. Então, ele falou que realmente ele se divertiu bastante voltando a ser ator no papel do Dr. Fitzgibbons no segundo filme do Esquadrão Suicida.
Legal.
Thank you, sir.
Mais uma pergunta do chat aqui, galera. E agora eu tinha separado aqui e não estou achando. Parabéns para mim. Aqui. Marcelo Júnior. Marcelo, traduz o Marcelo Júnior para o Mr. Ostrander, por favor.
Tá bom. Mr. Ostrander, one more question from the audience here.
Sure.
His name is Marcelo Júnior, like myself. But it's not me, okay? It's not my question. I would like that Mr. Ostrander talked a little bit about his work on Batman Gotham Knights. Does he know? Does he think that? Does he think that this miniseries it has anticipated some elements that came afterwards in Kurt Busiek's Astro City? I don't know if you know the title, but that is the question.
I know Astro City well. I know Kurt Busiek very well too. Kurt was also one of the best writers that I know in comics. We talked about it one time, and they were parallel developments. Astro City didn't influence Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights didn't really influence Astro City. It's one of my favorite series, not the least because the woman who drew it, Mary Mitchell, is now my partner as well. So she wasn't at the time. But and she just did a phenomenal job in my view. Her storytelling is impeccable. There's a scene early on where Batman comes in and does something, and the guys and a gun goes spinning around, spinning down the page and across to another character. That storytelling is a phenomenal bit of work. She worked also from the drawings from the Anton Furst, who was the designer on the first Michael Keaton Batman movie, and she added to it, and she did a wonderful job with the architecture as well, and she juggled all of the characters. It was a story in which Batman is a supporting character, but not the main character. The people of Gotham and Gotham City itself were the main characters in it, and I just love it.
That's great. Bom, em resumo, é que primeiro ele falou do Astro City, né, que ele conhece bem a série do Kurt Busiek, e ele acha o Kurt Busiek um dos melhores escritores da atualidade também, né, eu admiro muito. E aí ele falou do Gotham Knights, né, que é um título com alguns plots, né, algumas histórias paralelas, e que a parceira dele, né, naquele momento trabalhou no título, né, e ela tinha um bom storytelling, né, e ele descreveu uma cena lá da série em questão. Essa série, eu não sei dizer se ela foi publicada totalmente no Brasil, eu acho que algumas histórias sem dúvida foram, tá, nos anos 90, mas não tenho certeza se foi completa, gente. Mas sim, Gotham Knights é um bom título com boas histórias do Batman, tá? Não sei se vocês pegaram mais alguma coisa da resposta dele. Vocês querem, Mário?
Não, eu achei que tá perfeito, Marcelo. É isso aí.
A gente estamos caminhando aqui para o final, né? Já terminando. Quero mais uma vez agradecer a todos que estão aqui no chat com a gente. Levi, vamos para a última perguntinha. Sua.
All right.
Last round of questions, okay, sir? For us to wrap up, okay? Very quickly.
Yeah. Mr. Ostrander, sorry. I believe I fulfilled one of my biggest dreams of being a teenager. As today I had the pleasure of talking to you. You created some of the comic books I loved the most in the 80s and the 90s. I would like to thank you so much for the several hours of fun you provided me. And I have one last question. Is there any character you always wanted to write and haven't had a chance yet?
You stole my question.
Oh, dear.
Well, two for one. I get two people's questions at the same time. I suppose I should say Challengers of the Unknown, since that led me to along many routes. Dr. Fate, Doctor Strange. I like the magical characters.
Yeah.
The Demon, I would have liked to have a stab at. But basically, it just comes down to what character is available to me and what do I have to add to it. I don't always think that I'm going to have that much to add to it until I begin working on them. Boomerang is a good example. Firestorm was even a good example. Yeah. But something developed. Martian Manhunter, I had to sit down and figure that one out and figure out, okay, what are we bringing to it? What are we telling that's new about it? So it comes down to who's there and who's available. I suppose mostly I want to work on some of my own creations at this point.
Thank you so much. These are great characters.
Thank you.
Mario?
Well, nobody stole my question, but I have...
No. Levi.
Okay. I will translate. I'm getting very emotional here. I will translate, Levis. Ele mencionou que gostaria de trabalhar com o demônio. E qual que é outro personagem, gente?
Doutor Estranho. Doutor Estranho.
O Doutor
Estranho também.
O Doutor Estranho ou o Senhor Destino?
Senhor Destino, os dois. Ele falou os três.
Ele gosta de personagens mágicos.
Isso, ele gosta de personagens mágicos. Ele se questionou se teria algo a contribuir com a indústria hoje, mas ele preferia fazer também coisas dele, né? Foi isso que eu captei na essência da resposta. Não sei se
Não, é isso.
é isso. Então é o Marcelo.
So, as Levi stole my question, I will change a little bit my previous question. Is there any artist that you haven't worked yet that you would like to work with?
Actually, what I will say is I've been very fortunate in the artists that I have worked with. People like Tom Mandrake, like Jan Duursma, like Mary Mitchell, so many others. Tim Truman. How could I forget Tim Truman? Tim's work with me. Tim is my brother by another mother, and it's working with him is working with all of them. It's like not working at all. So I'm sure there are other artists out there who I don't know or haven't had a chance to work with, but I'm so pleased with the ones that I did work with. And you always find something new to bring out of yourself when you encounter a good new artist. And that might be somebody who's not even on the horizon right now.
Great. Eu perguntei para ele, mudei um pouquinho a minha pergunta, já que o Levi roubou, e eu perguntei para ele qual artista que ele não trabalhou ainda e que ele gostaria de trabalhar no futuro.
Sim.
E ele falou que ele sempre teve muita sorte de trabalhar com excelentes artistas. Ele mencionou alguns, né? Tom Mandrake, a Jan Duursma, o Tim Truman. O Tim Truman ele falou que é como se fosse um irmão dele de outra mãe, né? E ele fala que ele não consegue pensar em ninguém agora, mas ele gostaria de sempre tentar algo novo, né? Coisas novas, artistas novos, e que vai surgir sim, sem dúvida, alguém novo no horizonte, que ele vai acabar trabalhando e vai gostar de trabalhar com essa pessoa. And sir, we truly know that, we truly believe that there are many artists that would love to work with you. So we know that.
I should mention as well, there are both some Spanish artists and some South American artists who I have worked with, who I've always enjoyed working with. Their skill, their talent, their professionalism has always been wonderful. Someone who's down around closer to your neck of the woods, Leonardo Manco, and I did some westerns together that I had a great deal of fun with.
Great. Great. Ele também quis mencionar artistas sul-americanos, né, latinos, que ele já trabalhou, e ele acha, ele gosta do trabalho desse grupo de artistas. Mencionou o Leonardo Manco, né, que é um desses artistas que ele trabalhou no passado também, e que ele gosta muito. Acho que é isso, né, gente? So, last question overall, Mario. Go ahead.
No question, just thanks. It's been great working with you. It's been great editing you, translating you. I have translated mostly from the mid section from the Suicide Squad, Jeffy Sherwood, and so on. And I want to know, you to know, sir, that it's because people like you that I love comics and I love working with comics. So I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being such a nice guy. Thank you for answering everything. And you can be sure that most of the great comics I have here in my collection are signed by you. You have written them.
Thank you. And there's one thing that I would like to say too, because the fans, whether they're in my country or yours, are very, very important to me. I always take it very seriously. I know that people pay real money, maybe for a book, because my name is on it. And I always take that very seriously. And I feel it is my duty to make sure that the money that they spent, that the story itself it's worth it. It's worth the money that they spend. That way, if the art is good, if the lettering is good, if the color is good, all the rest of it, well, then they're getting more for the money. But my job is to make sure that the reader gets the best they can. These are hard times, and money is not easy to come by. So I appreciate anytime anyone spends some money on something that I do. The fans are very, very important to me.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks
Okay.
Ostrander.
I will translate then.
Yeah.
O John Ostrander falou que os fãs, os leitores, eles são muito importantes para ele. Ele leva os fãs muito a sério. Ele sabe o quanto é difícil para uma boa quantidade de fãs conseguir o dinheiro para comprar um exemplar de quadrinhos, porque nós não vivemos em tempos fáceis, nós vivemos em tempos bem difíceis, e ele se desdobra para que faça valer a pena. Ele conversa com os colegas dele e todos querem que os desenhos estejam bons, o roteiro esteja bom, as cores estejam boas, todos se doando o mais possível para que as pessoas se sintam satisfeitas e sintam que o dinheiro delas foi investido no lazer de ler esse quadrinho. E
ele é legal passar isso daqui para ele, como resposta do que ele acabou de falar. Marcelo Pacheco.
Então, eu passando a bola para o Marcelo, ele falou que fica muito agradecido por toda a atenção e gentileza que os fãs têm com ele.
Nossa.
Just to translate to you, Mr. Ostrander, there's a message here from the audience saying that you are one of the responsibles for him, Marcelo Pacheco, for loving comics, right? And one of the comics that has initiated his collection was one called Super Amigos 44, which brought us the first issue of Suicide Squad for Brazil.
It was Secret Oranges 14. I think it was Pretty Secret Oranges 14.
No, in Brazil. In
Brazil, yeah.
The secret. Okay, so
I think so.
It was the first story, right?
Yes,
After Legends.
It was. Yes.
So just a message, one more message from the audience, but that's it. And well, round of applause, right, for Mr. Ostrander, right? Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
A gente termina mais um programa aqui. Muito obrigado a todos que participaram. Thanks so much, Mr. Ostrander. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Guys, tchau. Bye.
Tchau, pessoal. Boa noite, boa live.
Boa noite a todos.
Até a próxima.
Até a próxima. Fiquem bem.
Até mais.
Valeu, pessoal.
Valeu, pessoal. Tchau.